These events are not easy, but they're a really, really valuable part of what NCIA is doing, which is, in addition to lobbying on Capitol Hill and working in the media, we're also building a community. And it's Brooke's work with building out our events program that is really leading the charge in that effort. I really also want to thank all of you who are members again. I want to thank Bang Chocolate for making this conference possible, and all of you for coming. It's, like Brooke said, amazing to see the expansion of the industry, which is growing at a rate that we never really imagined. Opportunities are clearly abound as investors and entrepreneurs are rushing into this new space. However, before we were an industry, we were a social movement, and we still are a social movement. Things have never looked better for the cannabis businesses than they are today, but we can't take that for granted because we are still under scrutiny, under a microscope. The world is watching Colorado and Washington, as well as 23 states now almost that have had medical cannabis laws on the books. And we have to work, we are leading by example as to what this new kind of industry will look like once it's legal in all 50 states and no one is ever again put in jail for cannabis. Besides taking the very basic step of joining your industry's trade association, which it looks like many of you already have, and hopefully if you haven't, you will by the end of the day. That's a basic fundamental thing that anybody who cares about the future of the industry is going to do. But there are other things you can do in your communities, on the ground. Many times they're actually free, just to help advance this social movement and this industry. Simply be a good neighbor, be a good corporate citizen. If you operate a retail or medical cannabis storefront, I really implore you to reach out to your neighbors and the neighborhood associations and work with them. Contribute to fundraisers in your communities, contribute to Neighborhood Watch. All of these things build bridges with the general public, which is by and large now on our side, but still does not have firsthand experience working with the industry, especially in states where the industries are just emerging or maybe don't even have medical cannabis on the books yet. For an example, when the DEA raided our founding member, Oaksterdam University in Oakland in 2012, there was a huge uproar in the cannabis community. NCIA, of course, reacted, Americans for Safe Access and other organizations mobilized. But more importantly than that, something that I am really proud of being a part of is we were able to get the storefronts up and down Broadway and actually around that area of Oakland to hang green flags in solidarity with Oaksterdam when President Obama came to town for a fundraiser. And that would not have happened if not for the work that Oaksterdam did and Richard Lee to build bridges within his community and be a model citizen. That's one big example, but there are many, many others. When you're working with your city councils or your zoning boards or whatever, it's a lot easier to get what you want when you have the neighborhood associations and your neighbors backing you. Along those lines, it's just really important that we put our best face forward in everything we do. Be professional. Don't use marketing tactics that you wouldn't want your mother to see. Be courteous. Be responsible. Down to the little details like answering phone calls or returning phone calls, paying bills on time, those sorts of things. Because if you don't, you're not just harming your own business because that's simply poor business practice, but you're actually marring the credibility of the industry. In addition to engaging the community and reinforcing a positive image just brought outward in the community, it's really important that you engage with your elected officials. We'll be talking more about federal policy and the work NCIA is doing on a panel later on with our Director of Government Relations. But it's one thing for them to hear from NCIA's lobbyists in DC, which we are knocking on doors every day. But it's a whole different thing for them to hear from you guys directly affected by this, who also, by the way, are their constituents who vote to keep whether or not they can keep their job. I really encourage all of you to get, of course, find out who your senators, members of Congress are, state legislators, city council members, get on their email lists and attend their events, give money to their campaigns. NCIA also maintains a political action committee that you can talk to us about, or talk to me about after the talk, which supports candidates that support the industry. But be present, make phone calls, and be there, because they need to be hearing from us a lot more than they are. It's important to remember that most members of Congress still don't live in a state that has any type of medical or, of course, retail marijuana sales legally. And I think that it's a really important thing for those of you that are especially consumer-facing, whether it be a retail store or accessories or consumer-facing businesses, to activate your patients or your consumers in the store. Create a way for them to easily make an email, send an email or make a phone call to members of Congress in the district so that they're hearing from the constituents on a daily basis. Collectively, as an industry, we are seeing tens of thousands of customers, hundreds of thousands of customers probably a day if you really look at the industry broadly. And they can be turned into activists. If it's legal in your state, you can have an incentive program, a coupon that you give somebody if they make a phone call on the spot. Other great retail stores I've seen all over have activism centers in the lobby, so while you're waiting, while a patient or a consumer is waiting to purchase their cannabis, they can stop and just send a quick email. That's really simple stuff you can do with an old computer, an iPad, and in the long run, impacts your bottom line because these policies do not change themselves. And something like 280E, for example, the crushing tax burden that 280E presents to retail cannabis businesses represents tens of millions of dollars a year alone, 280E, which some of you are new to the industry or haven't been to the panel to talk about this, but is the provision of the tax code that does not allow ordinary business deductions for expenses related to retail cannabis sales, despite state law, regardless of state law. Also, NCIA, just before I take questions, I want to just kind of give a little summary of where we're at. Like Brooke said, we're at almost 700 members right now, which is fantastic. When Steve Fox and I started this, actually here, KushCon in 2010, we had about 20 members from kind of scattered from the Bay Area and some folks from Denver. We didn't know. We knew that the industry needed to be represented, but we didn't know that we'd be back here in this building 3.5 years later with 700 members, probably 1,000 in the next couple of months. And that's because I think as we're seeing more experienced business people get into the space, they understand what a trade association is. It's just simple common sense. If you come from another industry, you probably were a member of the trade association for that industry, whether it be realtors or bricklayers or whatever. And NCIA has been able, through that growth, has been able to staff up. We've hired a full-time Washington, D.C. lobbyist, which was the first time, at the end of last year, was the first time that the industry had a full-time lobbyist working on its behalf every day in D.C., knocking on doors and taking meetings with members of Congress. Our lobbyist, Michael Correa, has already contacted every congressional office on the Hill in one way or another, had sit-down meetings with almost half of the House members' offices and about 30 Senate offices, as well as attending a number of campaign fundraisers on behalf of the NCIA PAC in DC. So your voice is carrying further than ever before. As growth continues, we're going to continue to staff up, better synergize our media relations efforts with our government relations efforts, and ensure that this industry will someday be treated just like any other American business sector under federal law, which is the ultimate goal. We also have been able to expand our events. We've done already 15, not counting this one, 15 events across the country, which, like I said before, not only foster best practices within the industry, but also foster a sense of community so that you don't feel isolated. I know one thing about having a national industry and a federalist system with marijuana is illegal under federal law, every state is different. And so everybody can tend to feel a little bit isolated So it's really great to have you all here talking to one another because you have a lot in common, whether you be from Michigan, California, Colorado, any of these states that have established markets. We also are going to expand out our educational programming into industry vertical events. In the Bay Area, here in Denver, in the fall, we will have an event on infused products and extraction methodology and best practices, full-day symposium. In the Bay Area, sometime next spring, we'll be rolling out an event on cultivation management best practices. And then in conjunction with our annual lobby days, at the end of April 2015, we will do a conference on a policy update as well as lobby training so that hopefully all of you who are members of NCIA will be able to come to DC and join us for our annual lobby days. This year we had about 60 members. We arranged over 65 meetings on the Hill so that members of Congress were able to hear directly from the constituents affected by these policies rather than talking heads on the media. So, the bottom line is that you guys are really making history. You're proving that entrepreneurialism and the spirit of human creativity will trump any nonsensical government program, including prohibition. And I am certain that while we must acknowledge everybody that came before us, decades before us, that have worked to get us to where we are, the sacrifices that have been made, and the money that has been spent, and the time and hours and effort to get us to where we are, I am certain that it's the growth of this new industry that is profitable, responsible, and most importantly, engaged politically that is going to drive the final nail into the coffin of marijuana prohibition so that nobody is ever again put in a cage for using an extremely therapeutic, beneficial herbal product ever again. So, thank you. So we have questions. Brooke, can you come back up? The questions should go to Brooke. Because I don't think we have a mic out there. If somebody towards the front wants to yell one out, we'll do one that way so that she can collect. Did you have a question?
What is the industry doing for self-policing? Like the alcohol industry, the tobacco industry, break a lot of their own laws before the government is before them. What's happening as far as labeling and warning, et cetera?
Very good question. Well, because every state is different, there are groups working within the states that are working on best practices for their membership and white papers for the industry as a whole that should follow in those states. NCIA does not work on state regulations or state level matters. However, we definitely encourage you guys to embrace sensible regulations because it's the rules that ultimately set us free, is kind of an irony. We do have a chapter or an affiliate, CCIA, California Cannabis Industry Association in California. We've rolled out an industry association, an affiliate in Nevada, Nevada Cannabis Industry Association, and ILCIA, the Illinois Cannabis Industry Association. And we'll continue to build our affiliates to work with, so that they can work on state level matters like self-regulation. And as far as what NCIA is doing, we do have a broad code of conduct for our membership that anybody should be able to comply with, no matter what state regime, regulatory regime you're under. And we have an ethical review process on our board to look at any complaints that might come in from other members about a member to see if there's any ethical violations.
Thank you. Actually, you answered both of the questions that people had submitted. I think it'd be interesting if you could expand on the type of businesses that we're seeing joining NCIA now compared to our earlier businesses.
Yeah, that's a good question. We've seen surge in ancillary businesses and ancillary products and services in all of these different states. I think we have members in something like 30 or 40 states now, even though obviously there isn't really a real direct-to-plant cannabis industry in that many states yet. And it's really important that we work together because even if you make bottles, for example, for a dispensary, that cannot deduct the cost of purchasing those bottles because of 280E, or cannot deduct their payroll because of 280E and is going to they're going to cut their spending. There's ancillary effects and a ripple effect through the federal policy that we work on throughout the industry. So it's great to see packaging companies, insurance providers, attorneys, CPAs, everything you can, cultivation equipment, anything you can think of in this industry is now part of NCIA, and it's great to see that unifying force because we all have to leverage our strength in numbers, and that, as one business, even the biggest cannabis business in the country is not able to put the lobbying resources in DC that are necessary to move the dial. So we welcome all of you.
Thank you. All right, yeah, unless anyone else has any other questions, and
No.
thank you.
Your meetings with people on the Hill in Congress, can you give us some sense of what attitudes in Congress are?
Yeah.
Are we getting some progress on 280E and what are we going to utilize?
So I'm going to leave some of the real technical issues around federal policy to the panel on that, which Steve Fox, our co-founder, and Michael Cray, our Director of Government Relations, are on. But we definitely are seeing more receptiveness and receptive attitudes from staff on the Hill and members of Congress than ever before, and due in large part, obviously, something happened in Colorado and Washington that took everybody by surprise in 2012, but also because of the media relations work that we've done and others to make sure that this is issues like banking and 280E are now at the forefront. So, and just the fact that the industry is now close to $3 billion a year industry and the fastest growing industry in the country is now all over the news, and they're having to take note of that. It was much more difficult to get meetings just a year ago than this year, and we're seeing attitudes changing. I think that there is kind of a sense that the legalization is inevitable, even if they don't like it. But also, and I can't believe I talked about this already, but what's very important victory for us as a movement, something that we've been working on for years, is defunding federal raids and other threats to medical cannabis providers in states that allow medical cannabis. And for the first time ever, the House of Representatives, a very conservative House of Representatives, voted in a 30-vote margin to defund that activity. And that's because of, I'm certain because of the work that has been done on behalf of the industry and other groups over the years to move that forward. It was a 99-vote defeat just 2 years ago. That's in the Senate. There's a Senate companion bill that all of the marijuana reform organizations on the Hill are working on. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit more later.